So today, the plan is to get into lesson 5, right? So we just finished up kind of looking at recycler views, talking about how to navigate around your app and such. So that's where we stand. Um, so you should have an app that you're building on already, and basically in lesson 5, we're going to continue building on that same app that you've started. Okay. I did some looking at what's available. Go back to voice activity. I did some kind of reading ahead and looking at 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, the different lessons that are there. I also kind of remember from last year that I taught this, that there were a lot of issues, I think, with these chapters in lesson 5. That's one issue that stands up is I know that there were some issues and there's some things I'd like to fix from last year I taught this. There's also another big change that's come in. Android 10, which was released just September 2019, end of 2018. That rolled out. There's a lot of changes in Android 10, which are really important, and some of those we've kind of hit as we've been going along. But they have a really big impact about the stuff in lesson 5. Some very drastic changes there. So there's different things that we need to look at, and so that came out 2019. That actually started to roll out. Android 10 started to roll out to new devices just last year. So a lot of the stuff that honestly I taught last spring doesn't hold up anymore. So there's been enough changes from between even just like, okay, this is what you do last year to what it is today. So that means that I got to take a little bit of a different tact to this lesson. Everybody with me there?
Yeah.
So things that means, the code labs for lesson 5 I'm dropping. I'm also dropping the reading assignments for lesson 5. We'll return to them with lesson 7. But for lesson 5, I've posted a slew of links into the Discord channel. That same set of links is also available on Inside Ranken if you go to the lesson 5 worksheet. So those are the reading. That's the reading material that I want you to look over. Instead of I have posted some of that stuff on Perusal. It is worth noting a lot of the material for this is not actually on the Android developers website. A lot of the updated information is on the material.io website. So you can see all those links down there below. The point to material.io. This is kind of the current source today of updated information in terms of working with the material components and material design, which is how we do theming today in Android. So this is where you want to look for the most up-to-date information. Fair forewarning, because of all the things that have changed just recently in this past 2 years with Android 10, a lot of my, looking and reading up on this, a lot of the answers on Stack Overflow are not relevant anymore. Just a heads up. So a lot of the things that you might find on Stack Overflow are probably going to be wrong. And that was my experience trying to read up and trying to troubleshoot some bugs with this. Okay? So I would advise you, if you're trying to find a solution to a problem, you probably want to look on the material design website first, rather than just going to Google and looking at Stack Overflow. Okay?
Yeah, those are those links you shared, right?
Yeah.
All that.
So there's a bunch of links there to kind of point you in the right direction with documentation that's more up to date. because otherwise it can be kind of hard to figure out, well, where is the current documentation, because it's kind of spread out. So that's there. And so what my plan for today is basically I've got a written up example. Droid Cafe, I've added some theming to it because that's what I want to talk about today, is how do you do working with styles and themes and color schemes. So that's what we're going to work through today. We're not going to do a code along because that's a finished example. I'm going to go ahead and give you the code for that. And so if you look in Discord, you should see something called Droid Cafe themed.zip.
Just a general question, but this is kind of after being bludgeoned by recycler views and
Right.
all what we learned in 4. This is kind of a softball, isn't it?
A little bit, I'd say. I mean, a lot of this is just about basically what we're doing here with lesson 5 is just going to be taking those apps and making them look better. That's it. All of it's going to be around how it looks and less so about the functionality. So, plan is to talk about theming today. We'll talk about translations on Tuesday and finish up anything we need to rediscuss or review on Tuesday as well. Translations is a pretty easy topic, but we want to walk through what the process is there for to say translated into Spanish, which is what I've asked you for the labs. Also, then Thursday next week we'll talk about a few new components, namely cards, snack bars, and dealing with some transitions. So that's kind of the overview of what the next week is going to look like. So again, there's a worksheet, and this is up on Inside Ranken. And so it'll give you kind of a rundown of the different things that we're going to cover and some instructions for how to do them. So, one of the things you're going to do is you're going to create a color scheme for your app that you're working on already. We'll talk about the dark theme and dark theme support, dark theme versus light theme. Talk a little bit about theming and styling. Translations we'll talk about next week, as well as cards, snack bars, and shared element transitions. So that's kind of the rundown of what things look like. Cool. Any questions so far on that, organization-wise?
No, you don't want us to move this theme folder into our lesson 2s, do you? Like that we have our
put
other
that into 5.1.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can unzip it, extract it into 5.1. And so okay. Open an existing project. I want Droid Cafe themed. So this is going to be under my 5.1 folder.
Is your stream running?
Oh. Apparently not. So you haven't been seeing any stuff on my screen. That's fine. We were just talking about the calendar. So, yeah. Colors and schemes today, translations. There's a lesson 5 worksheet. Sorry, I thought I had that already up.
All good.
I didn't. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. And I do need to go and change that switch. So when you get it the code pulled down and have the application running, you should see what I have there on my emulator. I think my computer's just fast on that front, Jonathan. I don't know that there's anything particularly that I've done. It's just one of those things that's very hardware dependent.
Just kind of looking at this and maybe just kind of hopping ahead. Kind of looked at it. It just looks like CSS, but for what we're doing now.
It's related. What we're going to talk about today is kind of serves the same function as CSS, but it doesn't follow the same methodology. And so that's the rub, is that it doesn't really follow the same process that you're used to working with CSS.
Okay.
So I would say overall, the theming and the styling system in Android is absolutely not as powerful as CSS. I think that if they would have just adapted some version of CSS to Android, that things would be a lot easier to work with and a lot better than the kind of hack together system that they have, to be honest. Because the system as is, I will say, is a little bit hard to work with, and there's a lot of definite gotchas. The big thing that we don't have in Android is any way to do selectors. So you remember from CSS, the key thing that you do is you say, here's the things I want to target, here's the tags and classes and ideas I want to target, and then here's the properties that are part of that style, that class, right? So I can say, delete button that has a red color and white text and things like that. I can do some of that, but there's a lot of things that CSS can do that I can't do in Android. Okay. So there is some similarity there, but it's kind of applying the styles, but without having the selectors to say, hey, I want to apply this to all of these kinds of controls, is not as nearly as powerful.
I got you.
The system works off of a lot of things that we've already kind of covered. We talked about how to do like the dimensions file with 3 different versions, 4 different screen sizes. So you have different kind of variants that you can put in there based on the screen size. The other thing we'll be looking at is, there's the colors file, which is there when you start the project, but we haven't really done anything with it. You can also do that based on different variants. So in this case, I've got it set up so you've got a colors for the default, and then there's a night mode colors file as well. So you have these different variants, which is something we've kind of already talked about. You can think about variants as media queries, right? So basically I'm saying, for this, with the dimens, I'm saying the screen has to be at least this wide. Or with this, I'm saying that it has to be, only apply this if it's in night mode. So there's those kind of things available. Now I see it looks like some people are still busy pulling down the project. Okay, everybody's got it in. Okay, so kind of looking at what's in here, you'll see a few new things versus what we talked about last week. You may notice that there's a slight difference in color between maybe the name of the item and the description. You might notice a difference in the actual color of the price. You'll notice that there's these sort of underlines underneath each item, dividers. Again, sort of styling there. You'll notice the buttons are different, right? So it's kind of a light green, and I actually moved that over from a button. Previously it was an FAB. You'll also notice in here that I've changed the text, which normally is all uppercase. Which is kind of the Android norm, but sometimes you want it to actually be the case that you put it into here. So I do have some lowercase letters in here. It's not being forced to uppercase. So that's one of those things you can do. Go add a cart. Same kind of styling you can see on the place order button. I've removed kind of the background on the delete button. And you'll also notice if you look at the order screen that there's a sort of rounded square shape to the FAB. So you'll notice a few of those things right immediately as you play around with the app. The other thing that you'll see, this app has dark theme support. Dark theme's been kind of a work in progress for many, many years. Some of the support dates all the way back to Android API 8 years and years ago. But with Android 10, what we have finally gotten, and people have wanted for years, is a way to change it from light theme to dark theme on the operating system wide spectrum. It used to be for many, many years that basically the built-in theme for Android has been light. Except for a very short period of time, I think right around Android 4 or so, Android 3 and 4, where the default theme became dark before coming back to light being the default. So there's been a long history of changes and things that have happened with the Android space. Historically, dark themes have been actually really, really hard to implement. And part of that is that there just hasn't really been good support for it. Okay, so what we're going to look at, one of the things I want to look at here is what's new with Android 10. So if you leave the app, okay, so I'm going to get out and go back to the home screen. I'm going to pull up and go into the settings screen. Everybody with me here in the settings app?
My emulator's taking a second.
Okay.
System UI keeps stopping. Nice.
It's worth noting that the dark mode switch, again, this is introduced with 10.0, so it's not available in anything lower than 10.0. So I'm working with the API 30 emulator. If you were to go to the API 21 emulator, this option is not there. So it's still possible in API 21 to have a dark mode switch within your app, but there isn't one that is operating system wide until Android 10. So what you want to do is go down. We're in settings. We're going to go down and we're going to go into display. So under display, you'll see there's a switch called dark theme. Switch that on. So that's where that's located. So settings, display, dark theme. And you will want to remember where that is, because in order to test both the light theme and the dark theme, you probably need to go and toggle that a few times back and forth to kind of see the effects. Okay. Has everybody found is anybody still looking for that switch, the dark theme switch?
I'm just having some trouble getting it to work, with the mouse gestures and all that. I'm on the home screen and I can't pull it down. I'm pressing and holding the mouse key.
You don't need to pull it down, you need to pull it up. So in terms of, you see the search bar here?
Okay.
Hold and drag that up.
Okay, and then you went right into settings.
Then right into settings.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a change, or is it always like that? Or?
No, that is a change. That is a change. Well, the top has always been this. Top is something different. And so some phones you might find it up in here. Not every phone has it in these quick access things. So anyway, that's the way you want to get into there, is going to settings and then display and dark theme.
Okay, yeah, all good.
Okay. So once you've got that, we're going to return to the application, and you'll see that it's switched over to the dark theme, right? So this previously was a white background. You can see it's like a light gray now. So that's all you need to do is in terms of like switching it to a dark theme operating system wide, which the goal there with Android 10 is that now every app should now switch to that dark theme. Everybody with me there? So that means the current recommendation is with Android 10 or later is that your app should actually have two themes. It should have a light theme and it should have a dark theme so that your users can choose, right? It's still possible for you to make the decision on an app-by-app basis. You could say, well, I'm only going to build this app for light, or I'm only going to build this for dark. It is still possible to do that. That's not gone. But the recommendation today is that you provide both for your users, regardless of what the application is. Everybody following with me there?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things you'll want to do is, in order to enable this switching on the system-wide setting, there is a change that you do have to make to the code. And it looks like, why is my projects, my packages appearing differently? There we go. So there's a setting in here, flatten packages. I unchecked that. I'm not sure why that got checked, but I'm going to uncheck that so I can see here. So in the Droid Cafe class, which is my application class, there's one line you need to add, and it's here on line 22. So you can see it says appcompat delegate.set default night mode. That's the important thing to do. If you don't add that line of code, then a lot of this stuff doesn't work. So like if I take this out, if I remember right, well, okay, so it does switch. but that's kind of the one you want to do. Is you say, okay, let's set the default night mode. There's a few different options you can set this to, and so here I'm setting it to follow the system setting. If I wanted to say, on the other hand, that my app is always in light mode, then I could say, here I would say mode night no instead. And so that means regardless of what the system setting is, my app is going to use the light mode. Versus I could say mode night yes, that says force it to be always dark. So if you want an app that's always dark, you just use night mode yes there. If you want an app that's always light, then you use light mode, night mode yeah, light mode no there. Okay, so that's how you can change that behavior. Is you just need to change what that setting is set to.
I find it interesting that they use yes and no instead of true and false. It just doesn't seem very much like coding as I know it.
Yeah, but that's what they have there, is 3 different values. It's constants, and because of how these are defined, they're actually integers. So you have follow system, you have yes, or you have no. So, but the one I want you to do for your apps is set it to mode night follow system, so that you can have both a light and a dark theme. Okay? So that's the important bit of code that you'll need to add to your application. And I have put that on the worksheet as well, so that you can find it very easily as far as what that is. It's that one line of code. You can also see in here I link to an article which will kind of explain some of what's new. This has been updated in 2019, so the information's is basically up to date. But it'll tell you what some of those things are and how they operate, if you want to read more about that. Okay, so that's how you do the night mode switch. Is you're going to go into the operating system, you're going to change that. If you want to provide a setting, maybe a menu item on the main activity, maybe provide an option in the setting to change it from light to dark, which a lot of apps do, then you would also need to update this code accordingly to say, and update some code in the application to say, okay, I need to remember what the current theme is, whether it's light or dark, and track that. So should you want to put, should you want to put an option in here to change it, that's one of the things that you'll need to do is call this with night mode yes, night mode no, and that will enable you to change it in the application instead. Okay?
Yep. Easy.
What else? So let's kind of get into how this theming system works. So the first thing you want to do to make your own theme is there's a tool you need to go through. And it's called the Material Design Color Tool. This is not so easy to find anymore. So I'll give you the link to it. The place on the page where it's linked to from their actual website is not the easiest one to find. It's kind of buried. But this is what I want you to use to start to create your own theme. Okay? Everybody with me here? So go ahead and pull this website up. You may remember that I asked you to go ahead and use this tool maybe at the end of last semester for your final project to kind of pick a color scheme. So
yeah, I thought it looked familiar.
Yeah, so you likely have seen this before. So what you want to do, basically, what the way that you start your scheme, your color scheme in Android, is you got to pick 2 colors. One is going to be your what we call the primary color, and the second one is going to be your secondary color. Okay, so let's say we're trying to theme this app, right? what do you want to pick, or trying to theme your own app. Let's pick a color for primary. The way I do that is first I click on primary, which is already selected. And I'm going to go say, well, let's take maybe I'll do a darker green here for my sort of an army green for my primary, and maybe I'll take a nice light green for my secondary. Okay, so once you've done that, you should have a layout like this. Does everybody see that?
So it just computer generates the light and dark variants of that.
Right. So you're picking two colors, and it will automatically pick a light version, a dark version of your primary, a light version, and a dark version of your secondary. Also, things it will do is it will figure out what color the text should be on top of those primary and secondary colors. So for instance, here you can see that it's decided, because I'm using a dark color for my primary, that I should use white text on top of my primary. Or because my secondary is light, I should be using black text there. So it's also figured out what color the text should be for readability purposes.
Does it ever suggest something other than black or white?
Nope. It's always black or white. And that's the ruling that you should follow for text. Text is generally should be strictly black or white. That way you get the most readability out of it. Yes, it's possible to pick other colors. It is possible to change that, but it is recommended that you don't. So for instance, here I could go and pick a darker color here, but as I do that, you can see the text becomes harder to read. Do you see that?
Yeah, so generally you don't want to change text color. Just mess with primary and secondary, and that's it.
Yep, just primary and secondary. Those are the only two colors you need to set here. And then you can either manually copy the colors out here one by one. The easiest way to get it out, though, is to use this export button up top. So you see that there's a few different options. Export to Android, export to iOS, export to CodePen. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say export to Android. And that's going to give me a... Let me actually go to my downloads real quick and do that again, because I already have a colors file. So it gave it an interesting name. So I'm going to say export Android. And so you can see it's given me this Android XML, this colors XML file. If I bring that up in a text editor, all right, do you see what I have in front of me? So that will actually give you this color palette, turn it into the necessary XML that you need for Android. Everybody see what I'm looking at? You kind of following how to do that?
Yeah, something else too. I mean, most of the time, just the straight up material palette's enough. We won't need to do a custom. Probably not.
What do you mean?
If they're on the right side there, where all the colors are.
Oh, correct.
Like
yeah.
Custom, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
custom gives you a complete ability to. It gives you a full color wheel, but really you should just pick from the colors that are available here. I would just stick to these. Yeah, just stick with the color palette that's here. That kind of constrained palette is recommended practice. So yeah, if you do need to pick any color in the world and you have some hex values, maybe because your employer or your brand or your customer already has something, you can just go enter those hex values directly. But I would recommend using the palette that's here. So once you pull that down, you'll have this. And so this is a resource file, actually. And if we think about kind of what we have in our resources, right? So I have this colors.xml file. One of the things I would advise against you doing, if you look at what's generated by default, if you create a new project, what it generates is this right here. If you've got a brand new project in Android Studio, that's what it starts with right now. Everybody see that? Well, those color values that you see here are already used in a few different places. So one of the one of the things that you'll run into if you just copy and paste, take this colors XML file directly, and if I were to kind of drag that into my values folder, it would replace this file, and actually your app would break because it's still referring to these color constants. Everybody see that?
In the attributes, you mean?
Yeah, well, it's referring to the attributes and the theming, which we're going to talk about in a second. So what I would recommend after you've made your palette, I would just leave this alone for the second until you kind of get it working, and bring it in here, right? So I've added it in. I haven't changed the values that were already there. Everybody with me that?
Yeah, so there's really no, it's a little bit tedious. There's no way to get around that. You have to do that manually.
Yeah, I would manually just say copy and paste it out of here. And so I would just say take this part of it and paste it. Bop, there we go. And in fact, if I try that with the application right now, just having changed that, you should see that now I'm already, hey, I've swapped out the colors. So I've got a dark color here. The primary color is being used for the price, and I've got my light color for my buttons here. So, changing the color scheme once you have everything cooked up is actually pretty easy in that sense, because you typically just have to change those series of constants, because everything else depends on those constants. Okay? So I'm going to walk back to the theme I had here previously. So Git Rollback. And so what I ended up doing after I'd fixed it, I just commented out these values because I'm not using them anymore, the purple and the teals. But I still kept the black and the white colors. Okay?
Remind me again, though, with the purple and the teal, the higher the number, the darker it is, or is it the other way around?
So if you can look over here, do you see the numbers on the top?
Okay.
Those are the numbers they're referring to. So a lower number is closer to white, and a higher number is more of a pure color.
It's just saturation levels.
Yeah, it's just saturation levels. So, 200 would be a very saturated red. 900 is a very unsaturated red. That's the difference.
Do you want us to keep our colors on our app, or are we going to be messing with these later? And so we want to revert back to the default.
What do you mean? Colors?
So the colors that we made in the material.io,
yep,
we put them in. You want us to leave them like that? Because I saw you reverted it. I didn't know.
I reverted it on locally because I'm kind of working through my here. You can keep it. What I want you to do is generate a palette that you're going to use with your project that you're working on. Remember the one you started from lesson 4?
Yeah.
So you're gonna put that into your. What you do with this Droid Cafe theme, that's up to you.
Got it.
I just want you to bring it into your project that you're working on. Okay.
Yep.
So that's how you get the color scheme. Is you're just going to pull it there, export it, and then bring it in, copy the values over into the colors XML file. Now, sometimes it may be the case that you want to have a different color palette from dark to light, in which case you may need to add an additional file. And that would namely be your dark palette. And so the way I would do that is I would just right click on values and say values resource file. I've already got one here, so I won't actually hit create on it. But what you're going to do is scroll down here. You see it says night mode. Bring that over as a qualifier and say night. And so I would just say colors. There we go. So this would create a variant of the colors file that's only used in dark mode. Is everybody with me there?
Yeah. Okay. So a question: what
Yep.
is white on the apps that we've been doing so far? It's been mostly purple and white. The
Uh-huh.
part that is white is not set on material.io. That is done
Correct.
with a dark theme, and that's
Right.
going to be that black or charcoal color pretty much
Correct.
every time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these
All right.
colors here that you're seeing, gray and white, that's changed. That's changed by switching from dark mode to light, from light mode to dark mode.
Okay. If you just wanted to go, I don't know, just go crazy or whatever and change
Mhm.
it, you don't want white or black. How would you do that? What would that be? Just is that just
Um,
setting it in the attributes and
yeah,
that's
I'll
it?
show you how. I'll show you how you can do that.
Okay.
I'll show you how you can do that. But no, this color tool will not help you with adjusting the background color. So going back to the code, so that's how you're going to create a variant should you want to have a different color palette. So you can either use the same color palette on both light and dark, in which case if you're going to use the same primary and secondary colors for light and dark, you don't need to create an additional colors file. But if you want to have, say, maybe it's red and blue on light and green and black on dark, then you would just create another file and put these same constants in there. And that would mean that they would override and be used instead. Okay? So for instance, with the example that's shown, you'll see that I have a muted text color here that's defined in the what we call the default XML, default colors. And you'll see that I've changed that, right, to a different constant for the dark version. Everybody with me there?
Muted is what the
Description is.
yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Like a gray.
that's what I've
All right.
set the description to, is that muted color. So on light mode, it's going to be this 66666, and on the dark mode, it is the 99999. So it's got the same value in both sided, muted text color and muted text color. So the Android operating system will automatically figure out which of those two values to use. So that's the first thing you want to do, is just pull that down and put your color palette in. Okay. Now, once you've added this color palette, just like this, nothing will actually change. There's actually a little bit more code that you have to change in order for your color palette that you've selected to be used. So what you want to do is go into, you'll see that there's the themes. There's a pair of themes files, themes.xml. This is again under values. So there's a themes XML that's just the default. You'll notice that this got no suffix here, versus this one is suffixed with night. Everybody see that? Those two files. So this is the default one, and that's the base styling that's applied. The night mode here one, that's what's applied when you change the operating system to dark mode. Okay, so you've got one theme file that's the baseline, and then another baseline for light mode, and then the other one that's used for night mode. Okay, everybody tracking with me here?
Yep.
So in terms of setting up both of these files, one of the things that you need to change, and I think I missed something here. Because this, it looks like I've changed, that should be primary text color, and this should be secondary text color, because those should be the same thing. So if you were to look at a new project, you would find that there's some other values here set for, you got primary brand color, secondary brand color, same thing with the status bar color, this section. What you want to change it to is specifically what's here. And you'll change that both for the default mode as well as the dark mode. Okay. So what we have here, this themes XML file, this contains actually two things. Themes XML contains styles as well as it contains themes. Now, one gotcha. You'll notice this here. There's a style tag here, and there's also a style tag with all these down here. Does everybody see that? So styles and themes both use the style tag. There's not a theme tag, even though themes functionally function a lot different than a theme. Themes and styles don't function the same way. They're not interchangeable. But they both use the style tag. So this is what we have up here. This style is a theme. The rest of it down below is a style. And so themes are used to change your application as a whole. Styles, on the other hand, are kind of a bundle of properties that you want to be able to set on kind of common things and set them in one place, and be able to change them in one place. So your theme, again, applies globally over everything, versus a style is more narrow. Okay, so if you want to make changes like CSS kind of style sheets that affect everything, that's going to be starting with the theme. Okay. So the way the theme's hooked up, and this is already hooked up when you created a brand new project. If I look at the manifest on the application, do you see that there is a theme attribute?
Yeah.
So that's what sets the theme for your application. So here I'm setting it to @style/theme.droidcafe. So that says the entire application is going to have this theme. If I wanted to use, say, a different theme for one of my screens, so maybe I have a admin or a settings screen or something else that needs to have a different theme, you can also set that on a per activity basis. So you can apply maybe a different theme to a different screen if you have that need. Okay, so that's how that operates. Is you can either set themes on the application wide, which you have to have one for the entire application, but you can also set them on a per activity basis. Okay, so themes are going to be set on applications and activities. Styles, on the other hand, are going to be applied to individual controls. So like you saw, we applied using the theme attribute. If I go to layout and I look at, say, the price field here, order product detail, you can see on the price, there it is. You see how there's style, product, price style? So that style attribute is how you apply styling specifically to a single control. And you can kind of think of that as like adding a class, right? So it's kind of like in CSS term, I've added it the class product price style. Okay, so then I can target that. Everybody with me so far?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, it's worth noting, just like in CSS, if you have inline styling, that overrides. It's the same way here, where any styling that I put through a style here is overridden by whatever local thing I defined. So if for instance here I would say Android, spell it right, Android text color, and set the text color to black, then this is always going to be black regardless of what's in the style. Everybody with me there? So this is kind of like an inline. You can think of all these properties as inline styling. So in order for these to apply, I have to make sure that it's not inline, right? So if we looked at like what we did earlier this week, we had set that price, the color of it directly on the text view itself. But what I've done is I moved that out. So let's look at what that product price style is. I'm going to go back to my theme. And so in my theme, scrolling down to the bottom here, you can see I have this style tag called product price style. So this defines a style by that name, which then is what I used, right? So I've defined product price style. It's got one attribute in here, item text color, and it says the text color is primary color. So I'm saying that anything that has this style has that applied. Bear with me there. So that means things like if I change this to another constant that I've created as danger, color danger, then you'll see that the price appears in red everywhere because I've applied that class to all the different occurrence of price. Everybody with me there?
Yeah, most of the time we'll just do it in the theme and then set the theme and just be done with it, right? That's probably the best practice. Target with a class so specifically.
Oftentimes you want to do both. Oftentimes I want to say, like this here, I'm saying I have a certain things that appear on multiple screens. I want them to have a unified or a standardized style. Does that make sense? So here I'm saying everywhere where there's a price, I want to have it have this particular text color. Also with like the name, I'm saying, well, I want the name to always be bold. So I'm applying this in all the different places that the name occurs. I'm applying a color of muted to everywhere where the description occurs. Does that follow?
Yeah.
So you can use basically styles here in a general sense are used as a kind of bundle of common properties that you can apply to multiple places. And it also means by doing that, then by having it here, then I can easily just change one place and I don't have to go through all of my different layouts or all my different layout variants to go change those details. Does that make sense? So for instance, if you were to think about it, if I maybe had 3 different variants of this screen, right? So maybe I have a landscape and a portrait and a tablet variation. I don't want to have to go change all 3 of those files, right? If I want to just change the color of something, right? So it's better to set that through a style rather than setting it directly on the control itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, this isn't too bad.
Yeah. So that's kind of how you define styles, and then you just use the style attribute to apply it wherever you want to use it. You'll also notice in here I've added some additional things with the theme. That's what I gave. This is what you're going to set the first part to it. Like that's the part that doesn't change, and I put this part directly into the worksheet because that's one of the things you'll want to just change. There's another section down here that says customize your theme here. That's where you can start to add additional things as makes sense for your application. You don't have to add anything beneath that, but you can, and that will make things behave the same way across different screens. So for instance, here I'm setting the action bar style, and the action bar style controls how this top bar looks. Okay. And you can see that actually is a reference to, you see style, action bar style is a reference to this style. Okay. Now, one thing you'll notice, both with the theme here, you'll see that it's got a parent attribute. This style, it's also got a parent attribute. That parent attribute says that this style or theme or whatever it may be, that this inherits all of the properties from something else, right? So basically there's all of these different items, all these different properties that are set in this style, widget, material, components, action, primary bar. I'm inheriting all those values. So that's basically how I take something that's already been styled and I kind of add my own pieces to it. Okay? So there's a style already for the action bar. And then I can extend that. Now, one of the reasons you might want to do that is because out of the box, if I look at the action bar on the dark theme, it shows up just the way you're used to on the light theme, but on the dark theme, by default, the action bar actually is invisible. You can see here where it has a black background. Do you see that? So it kind of blends in with your thing. So if you want to have it have, if you want to have your primary color on both dark and light, then you may need to set that as I've done here. So that way it's blue on both my dark and my light theme. You've also seen that I have applied the floating action button style. So that says that every action button in the app, I want to change how it behaves. So this points to another theme here, which you can see is kind of based on floating action button. And so I've configured a few things that are maybe different than the defaults. So let's look at that action button real quick. So on the action button, everybody can see it here. Normally, the color of your action button, your floating action button, normally it goes off the primary color. And so that's fine. You know, that may work for your app. It might not work for your app. If you want to change the color of the FABs, what you want to set is two properties here. Background tint, you notice there's no prefix, as well as Android background tint. I noticed if I didn't set those, then the border around it, the kind of glow or shadow, ended up being a different color. So that's why I had to set both of those. So I'm setting both of those to this secondary light color. All of this stuff here that I'm setting like this, that's up to you. I'll let you decide what makes sense for your app, right? I don't want you to copy and paste that code. Is everybody with me there?
Yeah. One thing I'm not clear about.
Yeah.
You have to have a parent, right? Whenever you set the style.
You don't have to have a parent.
Okay. I just see. I thought that, but then I noticed every single one seems to have a parent on there.
Yeah. So you use that parent to say I'm extending a style that already exists. Okay.
So if it was HTML, it would be like one broad class, and then on this specific one, I want something a little bit more. I'm putting the style on it.
So it doesn't actually really exist in the CSS world. So in the CSS world, I would say my parent would be, let's say I'm styling a button. I would have to say the parent is button, and then here's the specific things I'm applying to my button. This idea of parent doesn't really exist in the CSS world. It's actually kind of automatic. You don't have to specify it. But in the world of here, you often do. So here I'm saying that it should start being an action bar, and then I'm going to add things. Or here I'm saying that it should start with the base styles for a floating action button, and then I'm going to add my things onto it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The catch, though, is if I give it a parent, then it can only be used for that specific thing. So this style now can only be used for FABs. It can't be used for any other controls. You with me there? So I can't take the same styling and apply it to, say, a button. This only works with floating action buttons. So things I can set in there, background tint and Android background tint is how you change the color. If you want to say change the color of the icon, that's actually the text color. The other thing that you can do is change the shape of it, and the way I change the shape of that is using these shape appearance and shape appearance overlay properties. And so that points to another style, which is kind of a shape. So if you're going to change the shape of either a button here in this case or an FAB, you need another style called a shape, right? So we've got this inherits from shape appearance material components small component, and I've set two properties in here, so you can see the corner family and the corner size. So the corner size controls how big the corners are, and the corner family changes how it looks. So for instance, here it's got rounded corners. The other option that I can use is cut, and that will give it sort of angled corners. So for instance, I can go to the shopping cart and order, and you can see if I change it to cut, you can see how it sort of becomes a pentagon or an octagon shape.
That corner family, that is specific, right? You can't just call that anything.
No, that's the specifically corner family. This that has to be to change the shape.
How would you know that necessarily?
So the way that you find that out is you have to look through the material design documentation. So let me kind of show you where you would find that. So I'm going to go to the material.io website. This is kind of a little bit like the Bootstrap documentation is one way you can think about it. And I'm going to go search for the floating action button. So button, and I want to look here at floating action button. Okay. So here's the documentation for the floating action button. You see there's two tabs. There's a design tab and an implementation tab.
Yeah.
So in the design tab, what you'll find is a lot of suggestions about how you should use it and the do's and don'ts. And there's a lot of animated GIFs here about like this is how it should behave in terms of like what the expectations are. So you can go through the design and that will give you a lot of just kind of how you should use it. But there's actually no code in any of these design sections. To figure out how to actually deal with the code, you're going to jump over to the implementation tab, and that will tell you all of the specifics here, including how to style it. So for instance, if I go to theming FABs, which is down here, it will give you a bunch of code examples of how to make it look different, right? So they've got, a larger one, a smaller one, here one that's got text, etc. And so it'll give you the different styling that you need, some information there. Now, I will say that, here on the FAB, there's not actually a lot of description, but FABs actually use a lot of the same code, share a lot of code with buttons. So I'm actually going to jump over to buttons and again look at the implementation tab. Because they've got a much better readout of that here. So for instance, if I look at this, we can see the different attributes and stylings that apply. So for instance, if I look for shape, you can see it says app shape appearance is the style that controls how it looks. So you can see shape appearance there, and that says, well, it extends from shape appearance, small, compat. Long story short, it takes a little bit of digging to find all of that information.
Where's corner family?
Huh? Corner family.
What's it called? Corner family?
Corner family. So it's one of two values. It can only be either rounded or cut.
Oh, no, I mean in the docs there. I was sort of keeping an eye out for it.
Let's see if we can find it in there.
I would just do a control F.
There's
there.
So there's some examples there of them using it. So for instance, here's an example of them showing you how they got these buttons with the cut corners. And so they said corner family cut and corner size 4dp.
I can see where you really have to dig
to
get what you want, because you can't really, it's not so intuitive what you would put on there, like corner family. I would never come up with that.
No, I agree. I think that, in terms of Android's documentation, in terms of how to do styling and how to do theming, it is very, very poor. It's probably one of the worst documented features in Android is how to actually change your theme, to be blunt. And it's been that way for a very long time that it's been a pain point. And, it doesn't help that they have changed it with Android 10 to be something completely different. So, it used to be that we do these things a different way, slightly different. These material component, which you're seeing here, is a relatively new thing. So corner family is how you change it from, say, cut or rounded corners. I'm going to go back to rounded. And the corner size is kind of how you change how big the corners are. So right now you can see it's kind of, it was pretty close to a square. If I would go to maybe 4dp, you can see how that adjusts it. So this corner becomes only 4dp in radius. If I pump it up a lot higher, where it is normally, it's normally a circle. If I say rounded and 25dp, then you'll see that becomes big enough that these are actually, it becomes basically a full circle. So you can adjust that from very almost sharp corners to more rounded corners just by using the corner size. On a similar note, if we want to talk about the buttons here, you'll notice that I have kind of sharp corners on the bottom left, the bottom right, and kind of cut corners here. You can actually get a little bit more deep with the shape. So for instance, with the material button here, I've said, well, the corner family is cut, so it's cut on all sides. It's actually possible to say corner family top left, top right, etc., and you can change the corner family on a per corner basis. So what here I've said, all of 4 of them are cut, and then I've changed the size of them on the 4 different sides. So I said, this is 8dp corner here, 8dp corner here, and 0 and 0. So that's how I've came up with that shape. It used to be that things like this, changing the shape of buttons, we actually used to use drawables for that. That used to be the standard practice there. So you'd create, for instance, what we call a 9-sliced drawable was the standard way of making a background for a button. But with the new things and the new material components, the way to do that now is to use this shape. Okay. Any questions on the styles and themes stuff here right now?
No, it's just tedious and dry, but I think once we get the hang of it, it'll be all right.
A lot of it's just kind of playing with it. I will say that, honestly, there's a lot of bugs when you're working with theming, and that's been my experience every time I've tried to theme my applications. There are a good number of bugs with that, including one of the bugs I ran into trying to just make this app. I had tried to change the style of buttons globally, and that had actually affected these buttons in the alert dialog, which it shouldn't have, for instance. So, there's a lot of things there that make sure that you test it, both in terms of your light theme and your dark theme, because there's a lot of things there. Tips for handling pictures. Add some white space around my image that I couldn't seem to get rid of. Troy, can you send me a picture? Can you take a screenshot of that, of what you're seeing, so I can kind of maybe I can figure it out from what it looks like. Another quick thing to mention here, you can also, in terms of your theme, you can set individual properties globally. So for instance, if I wanted, one of the things you'd asked about is how do I change the background color? Well, the way you change the background color of your different screens is you use this property Android window background. Okay, Android window background. It's worth noting that it's not Android background. If you set the Android background property, you'll actually find that you have a lot of bugs with it, and your application actually performs very slowly, because if you set Android background, that actually changes the background of every component in your app, which creates a lot of side effects. So if you want to change the background of your app, this is what you want to use: Android window component. If you want, yep,
yeah. Just general thing here. So
Yep.
I see there on line 17, Android window background.
Yes.
And then right above it, you got floating action button. All right, the
Yeah.
Android part of it, what should we be thinking about when we see that? Because I would think it would just be window background, not Android. And I could easily see leaving that off and saying, why isn't this thing working?
Yeah.
What does the Android part of it do? And this can apply to other stuff too.
Yeah. It's the namespace. It's the namespace of that style. So some things have to be set with the Android colon. Some things have to be set without the Android colon. So this is kind of considered the application namespace, which is the default. This is the Android or built-in namespace. I will say, personally, from my experience, it's almost random. I have not found a standardized, predictable way to figure out should it have Android colon or not Android colon.
Okay, so there's no just window background. It's Android colon window background.
Right,
100%.
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
If I were to pull this out, you see how that turns in red?
Oh, that's good.
It's not valid. It's not valid. So a lot of times there's only one or the other. A lot of times it has to be Android colon or it has to be not that. So for instance, here if I go to, if I remove the Android on the other one, then that gives me an error. Caps lock got stuck. If I add Android colon here, okay, well it doesn't complain. It doesn't give me an error right now. Let me go to my night theme here because I'm in night theme. Let's say I go and do this as Android action bar style instead of action bar style. See, it no longer works. See that, Paul? So this was blue. If I add the word Android colon, it stops working. So it's one or the other or both. Sometimes it will tell you in Android Studio that it's invalid. Sometimes, unfortunately, it doesn't. Like you could see with that case, I put Android colon action bar style. It didn't tell me that was incorrect. So my experience has been entirely that I have to just do it by trial and error and see what works. Okay? That's the best I've got for you. Is try it both ways and see which one it works in. And sometimes you'll find weird cases like this. Like with the floating action button, I found out that I really needed to set both. I needed to set background tint and Android background tint because they didn't exactly work the same way. They both did something
I'm glad
different.
you answered that because I was noticing that too.
Yeah. So honestly, this is just one of those places where there's a lot of bugs. There's a lot of exceptions to the rule. I've really just had to go by trial and error with that. So my guess there with what you're seeing, Troy, is that it just has to do with the height of your image. And I think if you were to change the height of the image to wrap content, then that behavior would stop. I think that means that it's set to like match constraint or something like that. Or a fixed value. It's on wrap for the height. Is it also on wrap content for the width? Okay. So it's on wrap content for both the width and the height. Do you have an aspect ratio constraint on it? Okay. Well, yeah, because you probably don't want an aspect ratio constraint. I'll review with you offline, and we can see if we can troubleshoot that, because that's probably that's probably going to take a little bit more investigation then. Okay, so that's kind of, here's an example of a working theme, basically. I wanted to give you a code example to kind of see, here's what it looks like all together. What looks good for your app is not going to be the same thing universally. What colors you pick is going to be, that's really a stylistic thing. Whether you want these to have, sharp corners, rounded corners, which corners want to be which one or the other, that's kind of a stylistic thing that you probably want to play around with for whatever fits what you're going with. So I'll kind of leave that up to you. One thing I might mention really quick here, by default, the text is all uppercase. The property that you want to set if you want to change that here is Android text all caps. So if this is set to true, then that will force the text on your buttons to be all uppercase. And if it's set to false, then it won't be forced uppercase. So if I just flip that over here, you can see it's here back to add to cart, which is the default. And if I go back to false, you'll see it back in camel case. Questions?
It's challenging. Hey, you think we could take a break?
Yeah. I would just want to check that there's no question because, that's what I've got. A lot of it's just playing around with this in terms of working with the themes and the styling.
Yes, I agree. I think you're right. It's just got to try it and just solve it when you run into a problem.
Yeah. So if you run into anything, ping me. I'll I've run into some of the bugs, but not all the bugs. So maybe I can help troubleshoot some of them. But I figured that giving you a kind of finished example would give you a lot of pointers down to how to do some of the things that commonly come up in terms of kind of playing around with the styles. So that's some of the stuff that's new. The list of the full list of things that actually came into Android 10 is quite a bit larger. This was back in May before it was actually released in September. So that's a short list, but it's some of the things that you should at least be aware of going forward. Namely with the gestures is one thing, and we talked about the dark theme today as well. So you've got your reading assignments up. I posted the list of links in Discord for what to read this week. In terms of your worksheet, you'll find this on go into Inside Ranken. You'll find this under Worksheet 5. So you've got a few sections here, and so we talked about how to do color scheme, how to work with the theme. So, things to finish up today, and Monday will be a lab day as well. So, color scheme and the dark theme and themes and styling. So basically, the first 2 pages of this is what we've talked through so far.
That looks pretty straightforward. I'm sure it's on the calendar, but when does that due? The 5 stuff?
It's on Inside Ranken. It is due, I believe, the end of next week.
Oh, okay.
It's due on the 5th of March.
Pretty light week then.
Should be pretty light, relatively speaking. The thing is to think about, spend a lot of time on the kind of design and the look and feel of your apps and think about how that can be improved, as well as just doing, part of the reason there to is to give you some time to do the reading, because there's a lot of stuff on the Material.io website that I would strongly recommend you take some time to read through the design guidance and things like that, so you kind of know how these components work and what the best practices are for Android. Because there's a lot of things that it's like, oh, well, I wouldn't have thought that, or that's not what I would have expected. Okay, so that's what I have for today.
All right, so we're done.
We're done.
All right, cool.
So ask me questions as you come up with them. If you run into, as you're trying to theme your apps, if you've got any questions to that, I'll see what I can do as far as tracking down answers and whatnot. But that's all for today. So you can work on the lesson 5 worksheet today. You want to put that into your 5.1 folder. And Monday we'll continue with that. Tuesday we'll talk about translations and talk a little bit about adaptive layouts stuff.